Thank you, Mr President. The Federal Coalition Government has introduced regulations into the Parliament that will require security screening at regional airports. They've offered to pay for the equipment, but not for the much more significant cost of the ongoing employment of security guards and indeed maintenance. Now, I'm actually quite happy for there to be security screening at regional airports. If that's what Home Affairs says is required, that is what is required. But it must be the government that pays the cost. National security is a national responsibility, not a local council responsibility. It is local councils that own the airports. It is local councils that will be charged this cost, and they, of course, will have to pass them on to passengers. The Department of Transport Infrastructure, Cities and Regional Development have done a case study into Whyalla and found, and I'll just point out, Whyalla is serviced by both Rex Airlines, Regional Express and Qantas, and they've found that the new requirement will increase the per-person flight by $53 or $69. If the screening is only carried out on the Qantas passengers, the cost will be an extra $69. Now, clearly, if it costs an extra $69 to fly Qantas, fewer people are going to accept that option, and in fact Qantas will end up pulling out of that route. If it's carried out on both Rex and Qantas passengers, the cost will be $53, which will in fact just reduce the ability for people for their willingness to fly. They'll go back onto the roads. And in this instance, it will reduce loadings on the aircraft and will reduce the viability of the routes, and again will result in flights being cut. So the two best options are flights are cut or routes are cut completely. The government has botched this up. They failed to do proper due diligence from the beginning, and now they're only discovering what the devastating impacts of this proposal will have on regional communities. Whyalla and Port Lincoln will be seriously affected by this bungle. However, it's the thin edge of the wedge. Kangaroo Island and Mount Gambier will likely be next. So when bureaucrats in this Canberra bubble first dreamed up this policy, they thought the annual operating costs of the equipment would be somewhere from $530,000 to $760,000. They were wrong. We now know that the numbers are something around $1.2 to $2 million. Now, how do we know that? Well, because the RAT committee conducted an inquiry and caught on to the idea that this was going to happen, and asked a lot of questions. And amazingly, again, the government had done no analysis on the effect. Now, I can tell you that regional air travel is the lifeblood of these regional cities. It's how people get to education services, how they get to medical services, it's how medical locums get into the local community. It's how we support agriculture and business and tourism, and just allowing families to travel by air to see one another. It is the lifeblood, and if you start taking away flights, it has an impact on the community. Now, in the analysis, the department actually claimed that the increased costs might not be passed directly on to ticket pricing. Well, that just shows how hopelessly out of touch the government is. I can assure you that the cost will get passed on.
I wasn't sure.
Now, I've moved to disallow this motion, this regulation, and in fact the Senate will get to vote on this on the 12th of May of this year. It's not just Whyalla that will be affected. It's not just Port Lincoln. The department conducted case studies into other airports: Rockhampton, Geraldton, Wagga, Longreach, and indeed Kangaroo Island is not even on the list. But they're looking at that, and of course I'm now trying to get some more information on that. When this disallowance is moved, it will be a real test for coalition senators who often claim to represent regional Australia. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to buck the system and vote with me on the disallowance.
And our final